I am a sports psychologist. I work with all sorts of disciplines. I do like working with kids because I'm playful, I think. I do work with adults and professional athletes, Ph.D. and Snowboard and U.S. figure skating, and I'm just picking up some hockey as well. So I work a lot, and I just finished working 2 years with soldiers in Washington State. They started a new program. I don't think I even shared this with you. It's called Holistic Health and Fitness, and what they're doing is they're bringing these type of skills. They're taking what the NGBs, the national governing bodies, they're taking those concepts and they're taking them to soldiers so that they're physically and mentally a little bit stronger. So I just left that job last week, which was really hard because they are so grateful. So anyway, so that's what I do, and I have an eclectic background. I forgot when you said that this morning, like, oh gosh, my undergrad degree is actually in music, and I'm a clarinetist, and I still play. I played with the Army Band, and I sub for symphonies in Salt Lake because I live in Park City. So that's kind of who I am in a nutshell, right? I'm a mom and a grandma. So I love, like I said, what I do. So today we're going to understand communication styles. We're going to talk about the bare bones basic, and you guys all know this. It's probably a review for most of you. And understand what your role is. And please jump in as we get going. And then let's think about we're going to put you in groups that you can't sit and hide. You can run, but you can't hide. So anyway, what's your role? What is your role as a parent? What do you think? With your child? In terms of relationship with ski racing? Support. What else? Mentor, yeah.
Drive them to place. No.
Chauffeur, that should be up there, right? Right. What about financier? Right? You have to pay for what they do, right? Interpreter, yeah.
Wax their skis and stuff.
Wax their skis. So you're technical support, right? You could be technical. What else?
A
Listener. What else?
dietitian.
Yeah. Do you have to make sure they're, kind of eating the right things and doing the right things? And I think as I work with parents and kids, I always like to talk to parents because they are essential. We were joking this morning, and they kind of scolded me. I said, what's the best part of coaching? Is it the kids or the parents? And we said, oh, not the parents, right? And one of the coaches said, that's not right. And I was like, I'm just kidding. And he goes, no, that's not right, because parents are so important. And I said, you're right. And if you're not doing your job at home, they have a really hard time succeeding. So when I say know your role, sometimes it is very difficult for a child to succeed because the parent steps in. Like someone said, you're a coach. Are you their coach? No. And one of my first tasks when I started with U.S. Ski and Snowboard, I'm not going to tell you what discipline, but the parent was a highly respected coach, not this child's coach. And they wanted to go into the start gate. And when they hired me, they're like, Pam, get him out of there. And I did in a kinder, gentler way. I didn't say, get out of there. But I did in my psychobabble, and eventually they learned, because that was, what does that create for the kids? When
Stress.
It creates stress. Why? What do you think? It's confusion. Why? It's not your role. And what if you're telling them something that's different? Right? Some of you that have coached, a coach comes in and has a different technique than what you thought. And now you're conflicting with them. What does that do for the child?
Confusion.
It's total confusion, right? So when I jokingly say know your role, and you could be all of the above, but first and foremost, you are their parent and should support them, right? And at times you're a coach, times you're a teacher. That sounds very preachy, and I don't mean it that way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Right? You get it? So we know when you're communicating with kids, it's dyadic. It's a two-way street, right? So when you look, I thought this was great. Here's communication. Right? You're sending the information. Is the person receiving it? Not so much. Has that happened to you as parents? Daily. And it depends on what? When you're communicating with your kids, what does it depend on?
Yes.
Sleeping, eating, what else?
Distractions.
Distractions? Are they distracted? How often are you trying to communicate with your child and they're doing something else?
Every time.
Yeah, and how frustrating is it?
It can be frustrating.
For you and for who?
For that.
And for them, right? So you have to think about a two-way kind of street. If you're sending something, you got to make sure the person on the back end is receiving it, right? Two-way communication. So blah blah blah, verbal, nonverbal, right? You know the difference. What percentage of information is processed that's verbal? Do you know? About? Ungefähr, as they say in German, right?
20%.
Less.
Wow.
About 7%.
Wow.
Right? What's the majority? You guys are like, and what do we do to our kids? Blah, blah, blah. Right? We do. We all do. And what is the majority of the communication? Where does that come from? Where does that come from? Demonstrative communication, right? It's the things like what? Yeah. What else? Right? Body language. About 38% comes from tonal. Well, let's see. So spoken words, 7%, folks. We always say it's not what you say, it's what? How you say it, right? That comes from that rate of speech. Think about it in your jobs. If your boss comes in, and does everybody have a boss in here? Yeah, I think. And the boss comes in to talk to you, and they come in and they're speaking rather quickly. What do you infer? Is it a good thing? Maybe. Or is it bad? So rate of speech is important when you're talking to your kids. The volume that you use. The research with education, it used to be that you do, I know none of you do this in here, yell at your children. I know that, right? But when you yell, people think that that's going to get the point across. And when they looked at elementary school kids, they found this, the lower the tone of voice and you have to be in close proximity. That was more effective than saying, hey, get that laundry out of the washer! Right? So, rate of speech, tonality. It's like this morning, the kids were so excited. And they're like, shh, 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 Pam's ready, shh, get him back in the thing. And what did I do? I said, it's okay. Come back when you're ready. And I used this tone of voice. And what happened? They kind of came, and there were 45 people in there. So think about that when you're communicating with your kids, right? Body language, as we said, gestures, eye contact, proximity, and appearance. Okay, so then you're going to do something in a minute, but I wanted to kind of lay the foundation first. So these are different communication styles, and maybe you've seen some of them. They're from different theorists, and the 4 different kinds are like active constructive, where you're kind of moving toward someone. Now think about this. And then these are the joy multipliers. These are the people that when you speak to them, you walk away and you're like, that was a good conversation. I feel good. Can you think of a situation where the people that you talk with, they just multiply your joy? Some of you are shaking your head. Can you think of, does that happen with you with your kids sometimes? That you're the joy multiplier?
Also.
Oh, so can you think of an example? Anybody? Yeah?
An example is when they
They're the joy maker. That's right. They're the joy multiplier because they do it. But think about it. When, an example, your child comes home and they had a fabulous race. And they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, guess what happened? And what do you do as a joy multiplier? I didn't hear you. Listen. That's right. And what else? Ask questions. Smile. And you're kind of encouraging them, right? You're like, tell me more about that race. That's a very different situation than saying, like some people said this morning, did you win? Yeah, that's not a joy multiplier. So the joy multiplier is the situation where you kind of encourage the conversation. You're like it says, you're moving towards the person. You're like, tell me more. That was so awesome. You know, and you feel good about it, and they feel good. In that dyadic communication, they feel really good about that, right? So hopefully you can have a lot of these joy multipliers. Guys, you're not going to do this 100% of the time. It's not realistic, and it's just not possible. But think about it, and these little cue words, those are the words the Army uses. The joy multiplier, the conversation killer, etc. And they're easy to remember rather than all the other research. So think about joy multiplier. The other one's passive constructive, and they're the conversation killers. So what might you think that would be?
Moving away.
Moving away. He knows how to read. Good job. So give me an example of a conversation killer. Someone says something to you, and what would the response be?
Your kid is really excited and they're like, oh, that's great. I gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's like, great.
Yeah.
What does that do to the conversation? It stops it right there. You know, and you know, might not have been a big race, or maybe it was a really good practice. You're not going to believe what happened today in practice. I had my best time, blah, blah. And you're like, I got to go to the grocery store. You know, it cuts the conversation right there. I know you guys are smiling. I'm a parent too. My daughter called me. She lives in Italy. And my 3 grandkids, and she called me and she goes, Mom, I'm a terrible mother. And I said, what happened? And she goes, I yelled at the kids today. Her husband was deployed. He's an Air Force pilot. I yelled at the kids today, and I said, Allie, do you remember me yelling at you? And she goes, no, I do not. And I said, well, I did. So don't worry about it. You know, I said, just get real, you know. It happens. And they probably deserve being yelled at. But the conversation killer, think about it. So when they're asking you something and they're excited about something, rather than shut them off, don't be the conversation killer. Okay? The third one, the joy thief, the active destructive. These are actually pushing people away. That might be they come home, you have a really, really good training, and or say you had a race and you Alpine, you said, you know what, Mom, Dad, I had it's my PR, and the parent responds like, you know what, I was way faster at that age. You know, you got to step up the thing, and so they kind of just suck the joy right out of them. You know, it sounds pretty made up now, but think about some of your conversations with your kids, right? Hopefully this is falling on deaf ears. But be aware, you can't change anything or be better at it unless you're aware of it. And finally, the last one's a hijacker, and that's just kind of going on and on about themselves again. It's not willingly being destructive, but you kind of hijack the conversation, and they could be saying, oh, this was a great day, and you're like, well, you know what, next week when we go to Park City, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and kind of dismissing whatever they've said. So that's kind of the hijacker. So what do you think? Are you thinking about what you do and don't do? You know, we all do all of them, so don't beat yourself up. So passive and active listening, that's kind of what we were talking about. Are you listening when your child is talking to you? Are you listening to understand? Or are you just going through the motions? Or are you thinking about a reply? Or even, you know, we're talking about communication with your kids, but what about communication with the coaches? Do you communicate with the coaches? I don't know. Some do more than others. right? So think about it. Are you really listening to kind of grasp that? Or are you thinking, oh, you know what? If they say this, then I'm going to say that, and, you know, have an agenda. I just talked to a parent just before I came in here, actually, and they're having problems with their child in school, and they wanted my advice, and I said, don't, you know, they're reacting emotionally. And what happens when you react emotionally? What? Say it again.
They get defensive?
Yeah, if you react, you know, that's your limbic system. And that's, people say, what were they thinking? They're not, because they're not addressing their prefrontal cortex. So it's best not to communicate when you're really emotionally charged, for whatever reason, whatever they do. So listen to understand. All right, so I have a question for you. It's not what you say, it's what they hear. But you need to know your kiddos and your athletes, right? So, having said that, if I asked you what characteristics, what were your kids' strengths and opportunities for improvement in terms of personality traits, would you know that? Would you say? Some of them, yeah. When you go to parent-teacher conferences, and the teacher tells you something, and you're like, what? I didn't know my kid was like that. Are you ever shocked? Sometimes? All right, well, one of the things that we talked about again this morning was fixed versus growth mindset. Is anybody familiar with that or not familiar with that? What's a fixed mindset? Remember?
I'm not good at reading, or it's like...
That's okay,
yeah.
it's okay.
No, I'm saying I'm not, that's a fixed mindset, or like I'm still learning to read, I'm not, or versus like I'm not good at reading. It's like,
Exactly.
I just know an example of it.
This person that has a fixed mindset, and think about this for your kids. If they have a fixed mindset, they don't like to step outside their comfort zone. And I said to the coaches this morning, if you have I'll ask athletes that I work with, and not only kids, all the way up 60 years old, and I'll say, let me ask you, would you rather be in a competition where you know you can win? When you're like, yeah, I'm getting first. The other people, they're not so good, but I'm going to get a medal today. Would you rather do that, or would you rather be in a competition where you're probably not going to win, but you're going to really be challenged? Think about it for yourself. There's probably some fixed mindsets in here and some growth mindsets. What about your kids? Do you know if they're fixed or growth? What do you think? Both? Okay, how so?
I think if I would have asked, well, my kids are completely different, but if I asked one of them if you'd be in that race, you would want to be the one that was a little more challenging.
Okay.
But if you asked him, do you think you can improve in this area that you're having trouble with? No, I'm just not good at it.
Yeah. And, you know, people unfortunately think that if you have a fixed mindset, you can't grow from that. And you absolutely can. Do you know one way that you can do that? Grow from a fixed mindset? What would you think? Anybody?
Put yourself in challenging situations
In challenging situations, but not too challenging. You want them to experience success. So and you don't do it publicly. So you give them an opportunity to succeed kind of on a smaller venue so that they get an opportunity to succeed and then they grow. And so you can kind of flex your muscles, if you will, for that way. But people think, oh, they're a fixed mindset, they're not good. But that's their go-to. I can't do this. They're the self-sabotager. I suck at this, and their self-talk is usually not as positive. And so these are things, when you know your kids, when they come home and they say they stunk it up, how would you respond to that?
I always say to them, like, if they say, I just had horrible, I cannot hear that. It's not good, because when you finally do get it, you're going to be so proud.
Yeah.
Because you can.
Yeah. And what's your job as a parent? What did you say? To support them, right? So on the that's the fixed mindset. On the growth mindset, those are the kids that they're going to go for it. Do you have kids in here that are like that? They'll try anything. He's like that, he says. Right? What about you guys? Kids like that back there? Is your son fixed or daughter fixed or growth? Is that you? Tell me what you'd rather do.
I don't know. I think probably growth.
Okay, why do you say that?
Because I kind of like to get challenged, like in school and like skiing and stuff.
That's awesome. And what's your sport? Are you alpine or Nordic or what are you?
Oh, the free ride.
Free ride, okay. So, interesting, right? And he said he's that way in school and that way in sport. You think there's a correlation there? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know, if he wants to excel, you don't turn it on and off, you know, in one discipline versus another, right? So you growth mindset, they're willing to kind of go the extra mile. The next mindset, which I'm not sure if any of you have heard of, have you ever experienced outward mindset? Fixed and growth mindset, that's Carol Dweck's work out of Stanford. The outward mindset is a business principle. And I'm asking you to consider this. So when you're working with your kids and chatting with your kids, and obviously you're there with them every day, having an outward mindset is very different than having an inward mindset. Where an outward mindset means you're going to address the conversations with not their, you're considering their point of view versus only your own point of view. So you're kind of shifting from being, you know, disregarding what they have to say and do to kind of looking at it from a different perspective. Does that make sense? Have you heard of this before, anybody? This outward mindset? Yeah? It's catching fire, I think, and it has to do with just really shifting kind of your perspective. And so when you're asking your kids, and I'm going to ask you to do an activity in just a minute, and then we're done lecturing. I said I didn't do that very often, and here I am, blah, 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 blah. But I needed to set the scenario. So think about this kind of more collaborative and engaging kind of a scenario versus getting them to, even if you want them to do something, you know what I mean? Having them kind of coaching them in a way that will get them to buy into what you have to say. So inward versus outward mindset. It takes a little bit more work initially, but what's the win-win here? What do you think? Anybody?
More cooperation.
There's more cooperation, isn't there? And then what else rises? There's more cooperation. Results, right? Do you get them to buy into whatever you're telling them, right? Or sharing with them? You know, I think as parents sometimes we try to have, it's a win-lose. I'm going to win, I'm the parent. Kind of a situation where with an outward mindset, it's not necessarily win-lose. It's kind of, you know what the definition of consensus is, right? Where you come to the least offensive solution for both of you, right? So it's not really win-win, but it's kind of the best way to go about something. So I think that's kind of the way having that outward mindset. So new mindset, you get new results. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to think about, right now, 2 different scenarios when you had a challenging problem with your child. Ski racing, school, whatever you're thinking. One time where you were successful in resolving that issue, and one time it blew up in your face. Think about it. Take about 2 minutes and think about a time. Hopefully you can all think about a time. Wants and needs, that speaks again to the outward mindset. You know, what you want or what they want, you know, kind of being on the same playing field. You know, so anybody else?
One thing she said about is the emotions going into the situation. So if you were going with, number one, when you were going into the situation with, obviously with anger, even judgment, or bummed because your child didn't win the race, like, don't project that on them. Like you said, they might be happy with the 2 terms that they felt really good on, and just really approaching the situation without all that judgment. And what were you your own emotions, your judgment, that you're cold, physically cold, or angry.
Yeah.
You know, like just whatever that is.
Yeah, and we set expectations for our kids, and how do we measure their success? You know, coaches perpetuate that we want to win, and you know, we want them to do well. We want them to feel good about what they do, and rather than focus on outcome, what should you focus on?
Process.
The process.
Process. I use in my practice with 100% of the people I work with, level of effort. And I don't care, you know, if someone says, I didn't win today, and I'm like, what was your level of effort? And if they, honestly, if I've worked with them a long time, they'll say, it was probably a 7. Sucks to be you. You didn't have, you know, you didn't work hard out there. But if your level of effort, you had a 10, and you're like, oh, I was 10 today, and I killed it, and you didn't win, is that a not successful? No. So you can't argue when you talk about level of effort. What's your level of effort today? And it takes them getting used to, right?
It's also like, how do I explain this, but if the kids are always wanting to see your approval and you and what the parents think about them and peers and their
Yeah,
colleagues,
yeah.
their coaches, listen to your parents, like, how am I gonna look at my parents? So I have a bad practice. It's better to say, I have to keep going to it.
Yeah.
Or, well, you should be proud, you put it in there. Not, congratulations, you won, lost.
Yeah.
It's, wow, your effort paid off, it's your effort,
Yeah.
not.
And we all have bad days. You know, when they don't win, they just weren't great on that day. That shouldn't define them personally. And we tend to kind of perpetuate that type of a thought in sport.
But it goes back to our own experiences, right?
Absolutely.
How many in this room were competitive ski people?
Mhm. How many of you were competitive ski people?
No.
So,
Yeah.
Or athletes.
Or athletes.
Or, yeah,
Or athletes. You
right?
played,
Almost,
yeah.
I would imagine almost everybody.
yeah,
So we have our own
Yeah.
stuff that we bring to it.
your baggage. Yeah. And it's okay. I mean, it's a fine line. You want to push the kids so that they do well, but you want them to feel good about it as well. So it's a fine line, and you know, I don't have all the answers, but I will always have a job. I will always have a job because it's one of those things where you want to do the best you can for the kids and kind of set that scenario. So I know we're over already. Do you want to stop? I had some more questions for you guys to discuss. You want to do another couple of minutes, or do you have to go? Stay? Yeah, let's do it. I told you. All right. These were kind of effective communication. Still, we talked about it, but think about right versus wrong. Take turns communicating. Clarity of message. When you say something to or ask your child a question, or kind of take the low-lying fruit, then be silent. Be silent and let them kind of come back. So, hand gestures, this is just kind of reinforcing what we talked about. All right, let's do some if-thens. Back in your group, here's some questions. Your child competes in a race. If they compete in a race and they disqualify, they aren't able to finish, then what do you say? You guys, I want you to talk about these scenarios amongst yourselves. Second one, your child has a race of their life, their new PR, just what you were talking about, but they still didn't win. How do you reinforce that? You guys talk about it. Your child injured and their season is finished. What do you do? What do you say? Child doesn't want to go to practice. You're not sure why. What do you say? Yeah? Have you had these scenarios? Child has a temper tantrum when the race is over. I actually had an athlete, again, I'm not going to tell you what discipline, but they did wear a helmet, so you know, just saying. And it was a World Cup, at the bottom of the World Cup thing, and I'm like, and we walked away, and I'm like, no, it's not acceptable. World Cup athlete. Temper tantrum. Yeah. Talk amongst yourself. figure out the answers. Then we'll come back in 5 to 10 minutes. I wanted to bring up some of these conversations because they're so very, very important. And some of the thoughts were, it's how you speak to your kids depends on developmental age, right? And it's going to be different if they're younger versus older. Kind of what your objectives are. We did talk over and over about outcomes and how we push that as parents and coaches, and process is sometimes better. All of you hopefully haven't had all of these things, but I know collectively you've addressed all of these questions that I came up with. And so what's the best way to do it? It's a trial and error, folks. I can't tell you 100%, oh, say this, because it might not be appropriate for your child. But think about it when you are conversing with them. Think about that outward mindset and what's best for them. If they don't want to talk, don't talk. Do you ever get that way? Really? I mean, it's like, shut your face. I don't want to talk right now. Right? So respect that. Know your child. Know what's going to work best for them. And, it's a process so that if you want them to succeed, not only, I don't even really care about how well they do. And I said that to the ski team when I started. I said, yeah, I'm supposed to help them win medals, but I really want them to be happy, healthy humans, is really what I want. If they're that and they can win, it's good on you. But you want them to be, this is an opportunity in sport to create a sense of accomplishment, achievement, discipline, fun. And as the coaches said this morning, they want to have fun. So let them have fun and focus on that rather than winning. All right? Any other thoughts? We didn't get to have the slides again. Whatever. This is more important collectively. And now you know each other. Some of you didn't know each other before you started, right? Yeah. All right, get out of here. It was a pleasure. You betcha.